What's up, everybody? We have Kim Kardashian that is under fire because she doesn't know how much a milk carton cost. She just did Alex Cooper's Call Her Daddy podcast, and people are not too happy about it. We have lots to get into. I hope you're ready for it. Let's dive in. This is No Filter with Zack Peter, your go-to source for all the latest pop culture and reality TV tea, served fresh all week long. Now, let's dive in. What's going on, everybody? Welcome on in, everybody in the club. I hope you guys are off to a great start to your week. We have the weekend that is quickly approaching. We're going to be talking about Kim Kardashian and the heat that she's in. And then I have a very special guest. His name is Patrick, and he's the creator of this new show on Peacock called Devil in Disguise, the John Wayne Gacy story. I don't know if you're familiar with John Wayne Gacy, but he is or was a serial killer from back in the day. There's a new show. It's scripted. There is I believe a docuseries as well, but on Peacock, the show premieres actually today, October 16th. It's called Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy from 1972 to 1978. 33 young men were kidnapped, murdered, and buried in a crawl space beneath their killer's house. So if you love true crime, you're going to want to tune into this because no one was the wiser. Not for all those years. Why? Because John was charming and funny. He had a good all-American job, was a community leader. He even volunteered to entertain sick kids while dressed as a clown. Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy peels back the twisted layers of Gacy's life while weaving in heartwarming stories of his victims, exploring the grief, guilt, and trauma of their families and friends, and exposing the systemic failures, missed opportunities, and societal prejudices that fueled his reign of terror. It is premiering today, October 16th. I have the creator, Patrick, who's on the show, and we get into a lot. We get into the whole the genre of true crime, where it's going, the comparison to all the new Netflix show. Like, true crime has become such a big thing in our culture right now, whether it's docuseries or, like on Netflix, there have been a number, or not just on Netflix, on all the streaming platforms, there are these new scripted shows that are based off of killers like John Wayne Gacy. And so it's an interesting take that Patrick had on it. We have a really good conversation, so we'll get into that a little bit later. But I wanted to start off with this week's hot headlines, starting with Kim Kardashian. Because Kim Kardashian has been making some headlines. A quick update on Diane Keaton, though. It seems that her cause of death has now been determined, and it seems she passed of a pneumonia, which is, I guess the older you get, like, you do kind of, like, your immune system does become more susceptible. But my understanding, and we don't have all the details, we just know that her health took like a major decline recently, and then she ended up coming down with pneumonia. So I assume this was something that was not really expected and happened rather quickly. So my heart again goes out to Diane Keaton's family. Obviously, such a legend. I know, as I mentioned the other day, the Family Stone, everybody's been sharing clips of those. I think First Wives Club, that one, I've seen a lot of those clips going around, like a lot of good Diane Keaton moments and a lot of really powerful tributes, like Reese Witherspoon and Lauren Graham. A lot of people have had really nice things to say about her. I don't think any of us saw this coming. So again, love to her family. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, just heart goes out to them, and she will be remembered fondly. So I think this weekend we should binge some Diane Keaton movies in her honor. Okay, let's talk about, we have some more details on the Olivia Newsy book. I know, I was like, So her book, I guess the book now has a title. So TMZ is saying, or not TMZ, sorry, Page 6 is saying, it's all text and tell. Olivia Newsy, the former New York Magazine reporter who had a digital affair with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. while he was on his presidential campaign run, is coming out with a book that's set to potentially insurate his marriage to Cheryl Hines. Newsy's planned book will include sexually charged text messages between the political journo and RFK Jr., we hear that the book titled American Canto, in a nod to Dante's Inferno, will delve into her headline-sparking relationship with the Kennedy scion, complete with spicy messages between her and the now Secretary of U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's hard to imagine RFK surviving with his marriage and job intact. Okay, this was kind of a question I asked the other day, because we're writing a whole book, and I know I kind of called her... I kind of called her the knockoff half-baked Monica Lewinsky, because this is not, in 2025, when it comes to a cheating scandal like this, especially with a politician or somebody that's in politics, and he's obviously, secretary of HHS, I feel like you guys exchanged some naughty text messages. Is that really considered a bombshell scandal in 2025? Especially considering the Clinton Monica Lewinsky, that's why I called her a knockoff half-baked Monica Lewinsky. She didn't even finish the job, Because it was literally just a texting affair. And how do we make an entire book out of some text messages over a few months? What are we... we're gonna get a shirtless selfie. What are we gonna I don't understand what bombshells are gonna be coming out of this book, or what's so exclusive about it that we need to write an entire book about a digital affair, an affair that didn't even happen, didn't even fully come to fruition. It's interesting, but you know what? Get your check, girl. I don't know if it's gonna destroy his marriage to Cheryl Hines, but and it's going to be interesting. We're probably going to be reading it in book club. So, yeah. Let's see. What else? Okay, let's talk the Kim Kardashian stuff, because Kim K, what a firestorm. She's lit the internet on fire. And that's with her new Alex Cooper interview on Call Her Daddy, which I thought for the most part the interview was done well, but people are really picking apart two things. One, where she talks about Kanye giving away all her Lambos. And I think I touched on this on the show yesterday. I didn't realize it was going to blow up the way that it has, but because she was saying Kanye was so erratic that, and he would have these random episodes. She would come home and he would just give their cars away to people, which, first of all, if you're in Kanye West's life, if somebody's hey, we're going to give you a free Lambo, I'm going to be I don't know how I feel about that. Listen, I also am somebody that has a lot of pride, so I don't know if I would just so openly and graciously be yeah, give me a free Lambo. But the fact that he gave away, they had 5 Lambos, he gave away 5 of them, then she bought 5 replacements, and then he gave those away, and she's he would just do these crazy erratic things. He would have an episode and then just give stuff away. But also, who are the people that are around him? That concerns me, that these are just a bunch of yes people that want freebies and handouts that are taking advantage of him. So... But people are wow, or I hate when my spouse does that. So relatable. But there's another clip that I feel is going even more viral. I shared this one on my socials as well, and this is the one that people keep recirculating. And I'm going to have a hot take that you may not agree with, but here, I'm going to play the clip for you from Alex Cooper's podcast, Call Her Daddy, with Kim Kardashian. And this is where Alex Cooper asks Kim, do you know how much you spend on glam per year? And Kim's well, I'm not entirely sure, because I make sure that, it gets fit in as a business expense. So if I'm doing an event, then they pay for it. If I'm filming the Kardashians, then production pays for glam. But Kim's trying to determine how much her glam actually is, if she could give somewhat of a guesstimate per year. And Kim thinks that her glam probably costs about $1 million per year is what she's estimating, but nothing too crazy. And then this was her response that people are really honing in on.
I don't have a concept of what certain simple things cost, which really is, I'd like to know a little bit more about what a milk carton costs, and let me think about this.
You can text.
No.
So when Alex says you can text, that's in reference to the game that they're playing, where Alex asks her a tough question and she can either answer the question or she can text somebody. And so they have these cards with these pre-written text messages that you can send to certain people. So for example, one of the messages was, oh my God, it was to her mom, Kris Jenner, and was oh my God, TMZ just called, we need to talk. And then Kris calls her right away. And Kris like, what's going on? What's going on? Kim's like laughing so hard that she kind of sounds like she's crying. And Kris is like, oh my God, Kim, what's going on? Like Kris is freaking out. And then they're like, we're pranking you. It's a joke. So it was stuff like that she would have to text out to her sisters. Or one of the text messages was to Kylie being like, oh my God, I think mom is doing something shady with my money. Call me. And then Kylie calls her right away. And so this was that game. And so Alex asked her how much she spends on glam every year. Kim guesses about $1 million per year on glam. And so people are trolling Kim right now, though, because they're just like, a milk carton? Like, what day and age are we living in where milk's coming in a carton? Now it's a gallon. And to be honest, I don't even think I know how much, I was going to say a gallon of milk. I don't even know how much it costs on average in the US. Let's see. How much does 1 gallon of milk cost? Okay. Interesting. I would have guessed it was like $4 to $5. The average price for a conventional gallon of milk in the US is $3.22, which on a national average is down 36 cents. Interesting. So the average cost is currently $3.22, down 36 cents. See, I don't drink milk. I try to stay away from dairy as much as possible. I've started to introduce dairy back into my diet over the summer since I've started to work out more and I need to get in more protein. And now I eat Factor meals. Like my fridge is literally filled with Factor meals that I pay for myself, by the way, because I know Factor is one of my sponsors, but I like genuinely use the products that I promote on the show, and my fridge is genuinely stocked with Factor meals. I pick them every week. Sorry, this is not meant to be an ad, but that's a long way of saying I've been eating more dairies because there's dairy in the Factor meals. But anyway, long story short, an organic gallon of milk's average price is $8.77. That's crazy. So a conventional gallon of milk is $3.22 and organic milk is $8.77. That's wild. Like that's kind of crazy. Here's another interesting fact. So the average price of a gallon of milk in 2018 was $2.90. Wow. That's crazy. Wow. And wow, for some reason, Hawaii seemed very expensive because that's on a national scale, but then they break it down per state. And it says the price of milk varied significantly by state, ranging from as low as 93 cents in Illinois and as high as $4.69 in Hawaii. Something about that seems off. I think the AI got that wrong. Something about it. But anyway, $3.22, Kim. That's the price. I'm sure Kim is drinking organic, so hers is probably closer to the $8.77. I don't know. Oh, well, she's vegan, right? I guess she doesn't eat meat, but I think she does dairy. I don't know. I can't keep up with the Kardashians these days. But I mean, listen, here's what I'll say. When it comes to the Kardashians, I as much as you may get upset with me for saying this, I appreciate and respect that Kim is like, yeah, I don't know how much milk costs. Like, I don't live in reality. Like, my world is different. My income bracket is different. I probably spend $1 million just on my glam per year. This hair's expensive. I don't know how much the everyday American is spending on groceries. That's just not the life I live. I can appreciate that because I feel like the thing that we get so much is celebrities trying to be like, we're just like you, right? They do all their planted paparazzi pictures where they're like, I'm just like you. We're just like you. We're all the same. And it's like, no, we're not. That's why people are so tired of hearing celebrities talk about politics, because it's like you're not in touch with the everyday American, person here in the US. Like your life is just different. It's a very different reality. Like right now, Chelsea Handler is currently out there boycotting Home Depot because they surveillance their customers in the parking lots. And I'm just like, what? I'm just like, well, the government also surveillances us every day. Like we're surveillanced in everything that we do. When you log on an app or when you go on a website, you have to allow them to track your whatever, or you can opt out of that. But like You're tracked everywhere you go. But she's upset with Home Depot right now. And she's like, I'm not going to Home Depot again. And I'm just like, when was the last time Chelsea Handler was buying a hammer at Home Depot? Like, when was the last time Chelsea Handler was at Home Depot? Like, part of her stand-up routine, I know because I've been a long-time Chelsea Handler fan, like, part of her routine is she laughs at the fact that she has housekeepers and a staff at her home that take care of her, so much so that she's like a Fabergé egg. And she thought that it was hilarious that one day she went into her refrigerator and she found out that the fruit in her refrigerator was labeled. The case of watermelon, the container of watermelon was labeled watermelon. And so she's like, why did my staff think that I don't even know what watermelon is? Is that where we've gotten to the point? I'm just like, so yeah, you have your staff that's going to go to Home Depot. And I'm pretty sure you don't even know what happened. I'm pretty sure you have a house manager or an assistant or somebody that manages all of that for you. So as well-intentioned as I think it is that Chelsea Handler is currently boycotting Home Depot, I'm just like, really? Like, okay, got it. Cool, cute. So I at least appreciate that Kim Kardashian's like, listen, I don't know how much milk costs. Sue me. You know, like she's just like, she lives in a land, in a bubble that's not in touch with reality. But at least she owns that. And because she owns that, I'm like, okay, got it. Like I can at least have a little more respect for you in that because you're not, actively trying to convince us that you're just like us. Mamma mia. All right. Well, that's the Kim Kardashian drama. I don't think there are any other hot headlines that broke in the last 24 hours outside of that. I saw that there was the Victoria's Secret fashion show. People were looking great. Bella Hadid, who was Lisa Rinna's daughters, were walking in that. Like, I think everyone was like really, really brought their A game. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's all I got for you for right now. But we are going to be moving into my interview with Patrick Macmanus. He's the creator of Devil in Disguise. So if you, Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy, this is the scripted series that is now available streaming today on Peacock. You can binge the full series now. It's really good. And I highly recommend you tune in because it is, it's a nail biter. It's going to leave you on the edge of your seat. And we have a really good conversation. So I suggest you tune in until the end because that's probably my favorite part of the conversation is we get into the show and the production and all of that stuff, but then by the end we have a really good conversation that I think you will really appreciate by the end of it. So let's take a quick ad break and then we will chat with Patrick Macmanus, the creator of Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy. Fall always feels like a reset. Am I right? Between back to school, busier routines, shorter days, finding time to cook can be tough, right? That's why I love Factor. Their chef-prepped, dietitian-approved meals make it easy to stay on track and enjoy something comforting and delicious, no matter how hectic the season can get. You can choose from a wider selection of weekly meal options, including premium seafood choices like salmon and shrimp at no extra cost, and they can help you stay on track with your goals. So whether that's a GLP-1 friendly meal or a Mediterranean diet option, they have both. Or like for me, I'm trying to pack in my protein. I need to hit those macros. And now I can rely on Factor. It's so hard going from, podcast taping to event and walking the dogs, and I'm constantly on the go. So sometimes the last thing I want to do is come home and cook. So I like that I can just go into my fridge, get out a Factor meal, pop it in the microwave, and boom, it's ready in just a couple minutes, and it's delicious, and I can still track my macros, stay on track, get those fitness goals in. So if you want to try Factor, you can eat smart at factormeals.com/nofilter50off and use the code nofilter50off to get 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's a whole year of free breakfast. That's code nofilter50off, nofilter50 off at factormeals.com/nofilter50off for 50% off your first box plus 1 year of free breakfast. Get delicious, ready-to-eat meals delivered with Factor. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. Listen, I still love a good night out, but I'm not always in the mood to drink anymore. Luckily, I found a great alternative, and that's Soul's Out of Office Gummies. They give you that same light, happy buzz without the hangover. There's no sugar, and you're definitely not left with an awkward next morning. Soul is a wellness brand that believes feeling good should be fun and easy. Soul specializes in delicious hemp-derived THC and CBD products designed to boost your mood and help you unwind. Their best-selling out-of-office gummies were designed to provide a mild, relaxing buzz, boost your mood, and enhance creativity and relaxation. With 5 different strains, you can tailor the dose to fit your vibe, from a gentle 1.5 milligram microdose to their newest 15 milligram gummy for a more elevated experience. You know what I'm saying? I love a good vibe. I love a good, whether it's an evening or it's a weekend, especially in the summer, bring on the good vibes and treat yourself to Soul today. Right now, Soul is offering my audience, that's you right now, listening or watching this, 30% off your entire order. That's 30% off. Go to getsoul.com and use the code NOFILTER. That's getsoul, S-O-U-L, getsoul.com, and use the promo code NOFILTER for 30% off. All right, today we've got a very special guest. He is the creator and the executive producer of Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy. It is a juicy true crime thriller that is streaming on Peacock beginning October 16th. Please welcome Patrick Macmanus.
Hi, Zack. Thanks. I'm well. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So I was super excited. It took me a while to fully embrace the true crime genre, because I didn't like watching true crime growing up, because they would always get to the end and you're hoping for some resolution and they're like, and he's still out there. If you have a tip, call in. I was like, I don't want to know he's still out there. I have to know that they catch him by the end of the series. So this one I knew was at least safe, because we're a few decades past
Yes.
this case, but it was inspired by NBC Studio. They did a docuseries, right, on John Wayne Gacy. What motivated you to sign on to this project specifically?
Yeah. First of all, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure. And look, the truth, I keep talking about this. The truth is I turned it down twice. I had When it was first brought to me, I just had no interest in telling a serial killer story. And not that John Wayne Gacy was well worn. That didn't even come into my right. I just didn't want to tell it.
Yeah.
And on the third time that they asked me, this is with Universal Content and with Peacock, that they asked me to do it, I said, okay, well, let me look at the documentary. And I looked at the documentary. And by the way, the documentary is spectacular. I mean, it is really a very, very well done documentary. And I urge anyone who sees this to go and watch it, because it's extraordinarily well done. But I still wasn't convinced, because at the end of the day, the documentary was really heavily focused on Gacy. And so I said, look, if I'm going to do this, then I want to have a reason for doing it. And so we're going to focus it on the victims' families, on the police, and on the lawyers. And then I said, and on the victims themselves. And Peacock and UCP, from the very beginning to this second that I'm talking to you, have been nothing but supportive of that. But even when I said it, I didn't know what it meant. I knew what the first 3 meant. I knew what it meant to focus on the families and on the police and on the lawyers. But it wasn't until we got into the writers' room that we figured out these short stories that we do of the victims. And we obviously could only select a certain number of them. We had an 8-episode order. And so once we figured out that we would tell these short stories that of these victims' lives before they ever crossed paths with John Wayne Gacy, everything sort of fell into place at that point in time for myself and for the writers. And so what I think allows this show to truly stand out is that we are not paying lip service to this idea that people have spoken about for a long time, up to including on my own shows that I've had in the past, of focusing on the victims. In this case, we really truly mean it. And I think, again, what makes it special is that we never see them cross paths with John Wayne Gacy. We never get to the point in which he abducts them and assaults them and murders them.
So now there is this fear with this popularity in the true crime genre that there's this new glorification of serial killers, right? I mean, we've seen a number of these scripted series that are now coming to light. How did you delicately tell each of these stories? I mean, obviously that was a very mindful decision of you to not show their interactions with Gacy, but how did you get into the storytelling of respecting the victims and their stories while also being true to showing the serial killer that was Gacy?
Well, there was another conscious choice that I will say that I made prior to opening the writers' room, and it was part of the early conversation with the studio and the network about how we would approach the show. And one of them was that I said I will never show an assault and I will never show a murder. There will not be any of it on screen. Gacy, there are some episodes in which Gacy is more prominent than in others, but really he is a sub character in a lot of the episodes. The pilot he's very heavy in because we obviously want to get the story off the ground surrounding him. But I think that the combination of not showing any of the murder and and also telling these victims stories automatically sort of puts you into a box in which you're not going to be capable of glorifying John Wayne Gacy. And what I will say is our partnership with Michael Chernus, who plays Gacy, from the very beginning when he and I first met, I told him everything I just told you, and I said, look, one of the things that you're going to have to be comfortable with is that a lot of the times this show isn't about you, and you're not going to be in every scene. And from the very beginning, when Michael and I first met, he understood what we were trying to do. He fully supported what we were trying to do. He embraced it. And as he talks about, he says, like, most actors, when they hear they're not going to be in a lot of scenes, they are repelled by it. It's the thing that attracted him to the role. And so I'll say that we went out of our way at a molecular level with the show to ensure that there was no world in which audiences were going to come away feeling like we glorified him. But we also didn't avoid the fact that we had to tell his story. And so I hope that audiences will see what we were trying to do, which is to strike the balance between letting them know about John Wayne Gacy without making them ever feel like we were somehow glorifying him.
Now, there was obviously a lot of controversy surrounding other recent scripted shows, such as, surrounding Dahmer, Menendez brothers, because of some of that glorification, but also because some of the, the scandalous depictions of their lives, which, we don't know how true some of those details were in like the Menendez brothers monster series. There was a lot of controversy surrounding the brothers themselves and their relationship and whatnot. Were there any times where you considered maybe exploiting a more controversial or scandalous storyline for the sake of that popularity? Because that's obviously what a lot of audiences are kind of drawn towards right now. Or was that just a hard line for you? Because obviously you want the show to be successful, and success is driven by scandal, controversy, and interest.
So first of all, I want to say that I am personally a very big fan of Ryan Murphy and his work. I think that he has done his body of work is extraordinary. What he has done over the course of the length of his career in terms of opening up um, the world of Hollywood to look different and sound different and identify differently. And I think that he deserves an extraordinary amount of credit for what he has done over the course of his career in Hollywood. So I will follow that up by saying that art is subjective. Whether you're doing TV or film or theater or dance or painting, it is all subjective. And so I make no judgment about what other people do, because that is their art, and it is obviously extraordinarily successful. What I will say to answer your question is I drew a hard line. It had nothing to do in any way, shape, or form with the successes or criticism of other people's work. It was simply that I wanted to do it differently. And there is your subjectivity again, right? I Look, I'll be honest. I'll always be honest. I have said from the beginning, and I give a great deal of credit to Universal and to Peacock for joining hands with me and jumping. I've said from the beginning that I don't know if this is going to work. It's a little bit of a sociological experiment. in many ways, because I do know that the other works. We see the numbers all the time,
Right.
right? Um, and I don't know if people are going to be okay with taking the foot off the accelerator and focusing on these people's stories, which doesn't have any of the gratuitous violence that you could display on TV. But I did say, and again, to Peacock's credit and to Universal's credit, that if we fail at this, then we've failed doing something that we think is special, and we do believe that there is enough room in people's opinions and what they embrace in art for our show. It's just a different version of telling it, and so I hope that ours works, and I laud others for theirs working, right?
Yeah.
But I will never, and I've tried my best over the course of doing a few pieces of true crime. I will never do something simply for the sake of numbers. I want us to find a reason for telling the story, and everything that I've done, whether it's Dr. Death or Girl from Plainville, there's been a reason for telling the story, and
Mm.
mostly it's been around systemic failure in our society. For Dr. Death, it was in the medical community. For the Girl from Plainville, it was all the missed opportunities for a young man's mental health. And for ours, it was the failure of a society and a police force to be able to stop this killer when they had multiple opportunities to do so, but they were blinded by their own prejudice.
Yeah. And I also, and just to your credit, the show did have me hooked. I started watching it. I think it's really good. I look forward to watching it through. I'll recap it on the show next week. It
Thank you.
streams this Thursday on Peacock, October 16th. So you can begin binging it. I believe it's released in a full binge on Peacock, so we can all watch it together this weekend. But I did also want to get your thoughts on Gacy's psyche, right? Because I feel like a lot of these shows now also really dive into like the childhood trauma and things that have influenced them and built them into this quote unquote monster that they have become to society. And obviously, when you do a lot of that, there's the fear of humanizing them to the point where the audience then begins to have empathy for them. And whether they deserve empathy or not is a different conversation. And as you said, is subjective with any storytelling. But like, how much of that psyche did you want to get into Gacy without humanizing him too much to the point where the audience began to develop some sort of connection to him?
It's a really great question, and it was a challenging aspect of breaking the story with the writers. We get into it in specifically in episode 4. Um, but one of if you look at the show in its totality, there is a statement that is being made, and we don't come right out and say it. You have to work for it a little bit, but we had partnered with GLAAD very
Yeah.
early on. At first, they were advising us on our outlines and our scripts. Eventually, we had sent them the cuts, and because we were asking for their public support. And I say this from genuinely the bottom of my heart. It was the most nervous going into that meeting that I have ever been, because I was terrified that we had messed it up somewhere along the way, because there's always that fear. And this is when I first talked to GLAAD, what we do not want is for anyone to walk away feeling that we were somehow equating homosexuality or homosexual acts with evil. And and we never wanted to explain away who this man was and somehow allow people to say, oh, well, he was evil because of his sexuality or is evil because of his upbringing, yada, yada. What we tried to get across by the end of the totality of the show was that there are a lot of people who were dealing with their identity. Millions and millions and millions of people who've dealt with their identity issues. Millions and millions and millions of people who had socioeconomic conditions that affected them. Millions and millions and millions of people who had abusive, alcoholic parents. Right? But there was this one who murdered. And it is reductive to call him evil, but he was, in my opinion, a evil psychopath. And so I think that the balancing act that we tried to do is, sure, we will offer up the fact that he had an abusive alcoholic father. We will offer up the fact that he was struggling with his identity. But on the flip side, we're showing these short stories of these young boys and men who were struggling with their identity, who were struggling with their socioeconomic conditions, and they did not do this thing that he did. And so the hope is that even though it's not in your face, even though you have to work for it, that audiences will understand what we're trying to do, which is to say, you can't excuse away what this man did. There is no way of explaining what this man did. We're just presenting you with as close to the truth as this dramatization can possibly provide you.
How influential was GLAAD in that creative storytelling process? Because obviously telling a story in 2025 that happened decades ago, where culturally we're two completely different places, especially when it comes to, depiction of gay men and homosexuality. And while the intention was not to portray it as something that, was innately evil, there was a perception of it at that time that didn't necessarily embrace it the way that we embrace it now. How did you factor in how to tell that story accurately, given that time frame and those characters are based off real people with a different lens of, gay men then compared to now?
Well, the first part of that I'll say is that GLAAD got that from the beginning, right? Like, meaning that when we first spoke, they were the one. I didn't have to say to them, "Hey, let's remember, we're not in 2025. We're in the 1970s." They said, right, they set the table from the beginning, saying, "Look, we're going to present our thoughts to you from that perspective, knowing that we're dealing with something from the 1970s, while also ensuring that we advise you on ensuring that you're not falling into tropes or something that could demonize homosexuality." And so we never had an issue at any point in time with balancing those two. I don't want to, sit here and preach, but I would say that, one of the things that is becoming all the more. So our writers' room, I've worked with these writers for some of them. One of them was brand new, some of them for 4 years, some of them for over a decade. And by just happenstance, the majority of the people that I've worked with before are queer. And, you know, it it was really powerful because so much of our room when we were talking about the stories was about these people from the 1970s, but the stories that our writers would share were very much about their presence or very much about their recent pasts and their struggles with accepting who they were or getting their families or their schools or their cultures to accept who they truly are. And so much of the power of the show is that it's still as bad today. Sure, we've made strides. You can't deny strides, but the struggle is still very real, and there's a relevancy to it. And so I think that even though we are talking about something that happened in the 1970s, I can attest to the fact of all the powerful days and weeks and months in the writers' room in which these beautiful writers who I thought I knew because we'd worked together for so long shared stories of that were so gut wrenching on one side, but also so hopeful and beautiful on another, and that all got into the show. And as you make your way through the show more and more, you will see that these very real stories, these very real struggles, these very real hopes and dreams and aspirations are all on the page because they're really taken from the hearts of our beautiful writers. So.
And outside of the Gacy story, there was also another really important love story that I know you wanted to get across, and that's the love between a mother and her son. And that's kind of how we see the series open up with the pilot is, a mother looking for her son and being so determined to get the police force to look into this further. And it was ultimately that case, Robert Pice's disappearance, that opened up the entire, Gacy case. Why was that story specifically something that you really wanted to hone in on?
Well, the reason that the Rob Peast story is the first story is because of just how the entry point into the show, which is the fact that we're starting with the end, right? We're
Yeah.
starting with Gacy being captured, um, and and the Rob Peast abduction and murder was the case that brought him down,
Yeah.
because by everyone's estimation, it was because he came from an upper middle class family, and that the police took notice because he was a quote unquote good kid from a good family.
Yeah.
And so by setting the foundation of our show on this good kid from a good family who brought Gacy down, it enabled us to open the aperture and shine a brighter spotlight on all of the young boys and young men who were ignored because of their sexuality or
Yeah.
because of their socioeconomic conditions or because of their criminal history, right? And we conclude the show on a queer victim who who escaped with his life from Gacy. I mean, he was let go, proceeded to hunt Gacy down on his own, proceeds to uh, then go with that information to the police, and the police completely ignore him because of his sexuality. And Gacy goes on to kill four more young boys and men, including Rob Peace. And so by sort of bookending the show that way, we are making a very specific point, somewhat of an indictment on the system and how they let John Wayne Gacy get away with it because of all the reasons that I just spoke about.
And I mean, there were 33 victims. What made you choose these specific stories? Obviously, you were limited with the number of episodes that you had, but how did you narrow down which stories you wanted to fill those bookends with?
So again, great question. The first piece was who were the young boys and men that we get the most research on of their lives. And so between the NBC News documentary and the research that NBC News did, I have a private researcher I've been so lucky to work with over the course of the last 7 years or so. um, he went off and did a ton of research outside of what NBC had done as well. So at first, it was how much research do we have on their private lives, on who they really were, not who they were as victims. So that was sort of box number one. Um, Luckily, we were able to find a good bit on quite a few of them. Part two was, did they come from from like a different box? And what I mean by that is, one is a coming out story, one is a straight love story, one is a story about a mother and her son, one is a story about sex workers, right? And so we tried to find stories that sort of showed the full thematic range of what we were saying about the systemic failure, and those were ultimately the young boys and men's lives that we chose to explore.
And how involved were their families in contributing to the storytelling?
So the families were not involved. However, we did reach out to every family member that we could find. We sent over 30 letters, emails, phone calls. We heard back from five families. I suspect that some of the people that we didn't hear back from, simply we had the wrong contact information. Like, right, some of this was really doing a lot of detective work trying to find next of kin, and some of them, I presume, I don't know, just didn't want to talk. I will say that the five that we did speak with, they did, I don't want to say that they gave a blessing, but I want to say that they each had a response, which was, "We wish you luck with what you're doing." And that was sort of the totality of our interactions with them. We weren't reaching out in order to get blessings. We were not reaching out in order to get information. We were reaching out so that we could provide them a sounding board. A, we wanted to make sure that they knew that it was happening, and B, we wanted to give them a sounding board to tell us anything that they wanted. And I was fully prepared for the fact that they could be angry at me for doing it. But again, I absolutely, the truth was that I got nothing but good lucks from each of them.
Do you think this is a genre you'll explore more? Should this, take off the way that I know we're all hoping it will?
True crime in general.
Yeah. Or more specifically, these types of stories, right? Because I think there are so many of these serial killer stories that are now kind of being brought to light, but more of in the, like I previously noted, like more of like the scandalous, societal, cultural shock that it brought at the time, rather than telling these stories of these victims or kind of using them as the primary lens to tell the story through.
The short answer is yes. I'm very grateful for my career. I'm grateful for all of my partners. I have somehow become a true crime veteran. That seems to be we should put that instead of executive producer and showrunner. It's true crime veteran, I guess. I am. Look, if you look at Dr. Death as an example, like we don't show any of the surgery. They don't give any of the gore of the surgeries until the very end. With Girl from Plainville, we tried to approach it with as much sensitivity as possible, and that was a very tricky story to tell. And one of the proudest things that I know that Liz Hanna, who is my co-creator, and I talk about often is the fact that we were credited for not being gratuitous or salacious. And our goal every step of the way is to do no harm. And to hope that the stories that we are telling as I said, have a reason to be told, and that our focus should not be on, in any way, shape, or form, on the gratuitous, the salacious, or glorification of these people, but about elevating the stories of the people that deserve to be elevated. And that includes what we did here, which is the family members and the victims themselves. So yes, I am trying consistently to figure out a way to do no harm. And hopefully we will succeed more than we fail there.
So what would you say is the most important message you want people to walk away from this series with by the end of it? Obviously, there's a lot of, showcasing the systemic failures and, making sure that the victims are respectfully highlighted in their stories that are individually very rich, and telling them without sensationalizing the serial killer piece of it. But what do you really hope people walk away from the series with? Like, what can we move forward and take away from that?
Well, look, you said one of them, which I just want to underline, which is that I would like people to see these victims as not just numbers, but as names and people with hopes and dreams and tragedies in their lives. And I would love for them to go and do their own research on who these young boys and men were. That's part one. But on a more global level, I sort of alluded to it before, which is we cannot understand how destructive prejudices in our lives are societally. And I'm not just talking about identity or or having to do with homosexuality. I'm talking about in general. We live in a society in which we do not take time to do the nuanced, hard work of getting to know people who are outside of our orbit, right, or outside of our ecosystem. And I mean that on both sides. If you want to talk about politics, both sides of the aisle. I ultimately, at the end of the day, John Wayne Gacy got away with what he got away with because prejudice clouded every decision that people made in order to be able to stop him. And this is not something that is of 50 years ago. We are experiencing it today. And so I would just say, even though it's, maybe it's pie in the sky thinking, and it's probably asking a little bit too much of a piece of true crime, I would love people to understand that we need to cool down everything, and we need to be able to be open our minds and our hearts and hopefully our arms from time to time, and do a lot more welcoming of people that we may not necessarily agree with, because in my opinion, that is what's leading to all of the issues and problems and degradations of our society that we have today.
Yeah, I think we forget that we're people at the end of the day, and we allow one or two differences to, separate us from the 8 out of 10 other things that we maybe can see eye to eye on, or we just take like the humanity out of each other, right? Like we forget, we see you and we put this filter on you and we look at these 5 bullet points that make sense that we think is all encompassing of who you are without actually getting to know you and realize that, hey, if you're having a shitty day, I'm having a shitty day too. And we can be less shitty to each other because and I know I get my crap for this too, of being a little too empathetic or a little too graceful or a little too kind, but I'm just like, everybody else is being 20% less kind than they're capable of being, that if I can overcompensate by being a little more kind, and maybe, somebody slams a door in my face or is an asshole to me on the wrong day, but if I can just give a little bit more active love every day, I hope that in some way counters that, and hopefully that can weigh off onto other people, because we often forget that everybody's going through their own thing and we get caught up in our own bubble, and again, reducing people to the 5 bullet points that make sense in our head about who they are.
I so appreciate you saying that, because I look, I get into trouble too, because I desperately go out of my way to try to see the other side,
Yeah.
and the other side is something that I fundamentally disagree with. But there is a way to disagree in a way that doesn't demonize and doesn't turn people into caricatures of the other. And I say this, and I say this to writers, like younger writers, who ask me, like, what's the key to the kingdom? How are you suddenly successful? And I say that there's no way of knowing. I say that there is no amount of talent that guarantees you success. And this is going to circle back to what we're talking about in a second. I said, the only thing that you can do in your work, and I said, and this extends to your life, is how hard you work and how kind you are. And those are the only 2 things that you can truly control in the world. And everything else, I always say, is up to the gods. And
Yeah.
so I so agree with you. And I wish that there were about 3 billion more of you out there, because that's the key to all of our problems, and we just keep missing it,
Yeah.
over and over, and it's getting worse and worse because of the echo chamber that we all live in.
Yeah.
And I hope that people listen to what you just said, because I hope I give you nothing but success. I want nothing but success for you. But
Thank
part
you.
2 is that I hope that people listen to what you say and start to live it, because as I said, we need more people like you.
I hope so too. I think it's an interesting time in our culture where I understand the necessity for self-love and boundaries and all of those things, but sometimes I think we get so focused on my boundaries are the only thing that are important at the sake of other people and the empathy and kindness that I can show other people in the world, when it's like there's a way to respect yourself and respect your boundaries while also respecting other people equally. And it doesn't, just because I give a little to you doesn't mean that I'm taking a little from me. I at least find for myself, the more I give, there's also a self-fulfilling part that serves me too, and maybe that's selfish of me, but I just, there's it feeds you to feed other people too, and I think
Yes,
people
it
don't
does.
realize that, because they were conditioned to be in this scarcity mentality where it's like, if I give you, a cup of my rice, then that leaves me with a cup less, rather than, well, if I share and pay it forward, then there's a chance that somebody else that'll come back in some way, and we'll all just be co-collaborating in this world together.
I I would like to come back and do a podcast with you just about this, because
Yes,
because
I
that is
agree.
so beautifully well, it's so well said, and they are words to live by. And by the way, if it's selfish to do the things that you just said, great, be fucking selfish, please, because I think that people are so afraid of opening up, to others, and they don't understand how fulfilling it is to actually do that. But I
Yeah.
always say, I'm not a religious person. I make no judgment. You do whatever you believe in. That's fine. But like, the one thing that I say to people that I've taken from my years of Catholicism that I was raised in was the golden rule, and treat others as you wish to be treated. And if we could just as a society do that, we would be a okay. But We can keep trying, right?
Yeah, that's all we can do. It's just try a little bit every day. But
Yeah.
Patrick, thank you for coming on the show. Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy, streaming October 16th on Peacock. I started watching it. I'm already hooked. I can't wait to binge it this weekend. And I know there's going to be a lot for us to talk about next week. So I encourage everyone to binge it this weekend as well.
Thank
Patrick,
you. Thank you for the time. No. Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure.